Welcome to the Champs App podcast. Champs App is your recruiting and development copilot. If you are a player, parent, or coach, make sure to check out more content and tools to help navigate the world of youth hockey at champs.app. Also, if you've listened to the Champs App podcast in the past and it has helped you with your recruiting or hockey development, please tell your teammates and friends about Champs App. It would be even better if you subscribe to the podcast and review or rate us on whichever platform you're listening to or watching us on.
I want to thank Max for coming on the podcast and sharing his thoughts on the Boston College women's hockey program and the recruiting process. I really appreciated him answering some tough questions about the current state of the BC women's hockey team and how they plan to return to national prominence. You can connect with Max on the BC website or via his Champs App profile. Links to both are in the show notes.
Tired of spending hours emailing coaches with no idea if they're even reading your messages? Champs App messaging is the fast, easy way to send personalized, error-free emails and know exactly when they've been opened. The coach's name, school, and email are automatically populated for you, so every message is accurate and complete. Choose from smart templates that pull your details directly from your Champs App profile, whether you're sharing your schedule or a new video. Cut your email time in half and finally see which teams are showing interest. One parent told us, what used to take a whole evening now takes under 2 hours. Champs App messaging, faster, smarter recruiting, made easy.
I'm very excited to welcome to the podcast Max Gavin, assistant coach with the Boston College women's hockey team. Originally from Edina, Minnesota, Max played youth and junior hockey in Ontario before playing college hockey at Adrian College. It was also at Adrian College that he started his coaching career. He then returned to Ontario to coach in the junior ranks before making his way to NCAA hockey at Vermont and Dartmouth. In 2023, he joined the staff at BC, where he is now in his third season with the Eagles. Welcome to the podcast, Max.
Thanks for having me, Ray. Really appreciate it.
Hey, why don't we start you off like we do all of our guests, talking about how you started getting into the great game of hockey. And obviously you come from a lineage of hockey from what I understand. So maybe just talk about how you started in Minnesota and then obviously in Ontario.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you asking. Yeah, so I was very fortunate to grow up with very athletic family. My dad, the reason I was born in Minnesota, I'm actually the only American in my family. My sister's Canadian. Both of my parents are Canadian. My dad happened to be playing in Minnesota at the time. So then when he retired, we actually moved back to Toronto. So grew up in Toronto, but born in Minnesota. And, I feel like you kind of have to be around the rink. You grow up around it. Very fortunate to do that. And it kind of led for my love for the game. And, as you grow up playing and learning, you get to a point where you realize that, your dream might have to take a shift, and that's when coaching became the next thing. And so, that's what led me to kind of get into that and led me to where I am here today. So very grateful for those experiences for sure.
Perfect. Yeah. So I do have to mention that I'm old enough to actually have seen your dad play because I know he played in Hartford in the mid 80s and I was a Montreal Canadiens fan. And I believe it was very close. I think it was 1986 year that actually Hartford should have beaten the Canadiens, but they didn't. And the Canadiens ended up winning the Stanley Cup. But your dad, Stu Gavin, was a longtime NHLer. And you also mentioned that your mom played field hockey. Is that correct?
Yes, my mom was a 84 Olympian for Canada as well for field hockey.
How do you
She would actually tell you that she's the one. You'll notice that after they got married was when my dad had his best years because she taught him how to actually handle the puck. So she would say that she would give you that.
And would your mom say that like being able to handle a field hockey ball is much harder than handling an ice hockey puck?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you only have one side to use, right? For those who don't know, listening, field hockey's only right-handed sticks. So pretty impressive what they do. And there's no gliding, out on the pitch, right? That's what the big thing is. You can't cheat out there. So
Got it. So what is it that your parents taught you about hockey that made you successful in hockey growing up in youth hockey and obviously junior and then, eventually playing college hockey?
no, that's a great question. And I think for kids at home too, to know that like finding something that makes you valuable to your team. Not everybody gets to be the goal scorer, not everybody gets to be the playmaker. Every team needs good teammates. Every team needs good, the word we always use in hockey, obviously grinders, so I think it was about learning how to be, in a team environment, try to be a pro where you treat people the right way, you know, whether it's the trainers or the staff, support staff, like having real appreciation for those around you, I think was a big thing. And obviously getting to, you know, go to practices, do different things, definitely gave you an insight into how people prepare. And actually think that that helped me more in coaching, even more so now than it did when I played, to be honest.
Got it. Okay. So I'm just curious, other than a brief stint in playing professional hockey in the ECHL, you almost immediately went into coaching. What was that decision like, and why did you do it?
Well, I was fortunate to get the opportunity to go to Wheeling. It was actually the year that the Mumps went through Pittsburgh, the
Okay.
Penguins, and so they pulled everybody up. So at Christmas time, I think they were down to like 8 bodies down in Wheeling. So I was happened to get a chance to go down there. Was only supposed to go for the weekend, and then wound up doing okay. So I stuck around, and I just finished college. I went into college later. So, coming out later, I was, in my mid 20s and seeing these 18, 19-year-old guys come down who are on NHL contracts and then going back up to the American League. I realized pretty quick that, if I was to continue on in hockey, it was, the chance to have a career per se was going to be in a different avenue. So I think I looked around the room and realized that my next step would be, something away from, on the ice directly, playing wise. So I actually, when I went back for a alumni event in the spring to see some of my friends at Adrian, the coach at the time had approached me and said, "Hey, what are you doing next year? I actually need a coach." And so it was the perfect opportunity to go back to somewhere you're comfortable and understand and really kind of cut your teeth. So it was an awesome experience, and it was just kind of happened so that it worked out that way.
Got it. And so then you also went to back to Ontario and, of course, coached in the Northern Ontario Junior League. Once again, still with men's hockey, and then you eventually made your way to Vermont. Maybe just talk about that progression, and then how you ended up then at Dartmouth in the women's side of things.
Absolutely. No, and yeah, great question. I think when I originally got the opportunity at Adrian, again, it just kind of presented itself, just through, and I think as you'll see the connections as it goes for most people you probably interview is a lot of it is just, you're in a situation and something presents itself and you're ready to take it. So that was the first time I got into coaching. And then we were fortunate to win the national championship at Adrian in my third year there. And our head coach at the time, his name was Gary Estalos. He's still there at Adrian. He was like, "Hey, I know Powassan is looking for a head coach," because he had actually worked there in a different capacity years previous. So I, reached out to the GM. We had an initial phone interview. Got in the car and drove up to meet at can never forget the owner and the general manager at Casey's, and that's what led to that. And when I was looking at it originally, it was like maybe try to go to the major junior route into pro hockey. That was kind of the thought process there. And we were affiliated with the North Bay Battalion in the OHL, so got to work with some of their prospects, get to be around, their players and their staff, so that was a really great experience as well.
Got it. And so then how did you make your way back south of the border at Vermont? I believe as an operations director of operations. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. Yeah. So we were actually going into my second year in Powassan, and we were going in number 1 seed in the playoffs, rolling, and we're getting ready to go in for game 1 of the first round of playoffs.
This must
And
be
I
March.
get a call from our owner and Jim, and he says, "Hey, you're gonna have to pull the team back. We might have to send everybody home." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And we had literally just got done our pre-scout meeting the day before the game. And
Yeah.
he's like, "Yeah, we got to send everybody home. It looks like this thing's getting real." And that was when the pandemic hit. So was actually up in Canada, there was no hockey basically for the year. So, was actually out, kind of waiting for the next opportunity. And in that time realized that, you know, really enjoyed the college environment, and really the goal was to try to get back, stateside. And again, opportunity presented itself. A friend of mine who is now at Rice Prep, Aaron Bain, his brother's the trainer at UVM, the athletic trainer. and he had kind of indirectly said, hey, they might be hiring for an operations person if you're interested. And so I just kind of said, if that's the opportunity to get me back in, I'm all on board. And again, one thing led to another. There's an interview, and I'm in Vermont in August, so that was kind of how that led. And great experience there on the men's side. And then the question I usually get is, why the switch, right? Why the switch over? So sorry if I jumped ahead on
question
you.
off my list.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
but no, it was opportunity. I was very fortunate that at the time I was told about an opportunity that could be there at Dartmouth, and got in touch with the coach at the time, who was Liz Keaty Norton, and just kind of went through a formal interview process, and through that got the call that, hey, would you want the job? And I looked at it as, you get to be coaching the best athletes in the world at, the highest level in Division I hockey, and what an amazing experience. So I jumped head first in, and I've loved every second of it. And it's been an amazing, amazing experience. If you told me 10 years ago this is what I'd be doing, I don't know if I would say that's what I'm doing, but I absolutely love it. And I'm very, very fortunate to be where I'm at now. And I'm fortunate to have had great people advocate for me throughout my career.
Perfect. Yeah, no, I know Liz Kitty, we had her as a guest on the podcast, and she was phenomenal. I know she did a great job at Dartmouth for the couple of years that she was there, but I believe that for personal reasons, she thought, maybe made more sense for her to go back to prep school, and because she has a growing family and things like that. So unfortunately, that also meant some changes over at Dartmouth. And I believe then that's kind of how you made your way into Boston College. Maybe just talk about, that change from really cold Dartmouth to a little bit nicer and a little bit bigger Boston.
Yeah, and my wife and I had an amazing experience at Dartmouth. Great people, great players. We were fortunate to be around some good people. And honestly, without Liz, like, I wouldn't have got the opportunity I have here with Coach Crowley and the BC staff, because she was one that was able to advocate for me here. And very grateful for we all call her Kinger. So I get, so I'm very grateful for Kinger that, she was willing to take a chance on me and, bring me in here, and to be able to work with her and Kate every day, and the rest of our staff. It's been an amazing learning experience. I tell kids all the time, like, to be around somebody that's been a 3-time Olympian, done everything you want to do. And, won, I don't even know how many, I think it's like 400 something games. Very grateful to learn from her every day as well.
Ready to see how you stack up against future Division I players? Champs IQ gives you an unbiased look at your potential. Just submit at least 10 minutes of your edited shifts, and our expert scouts will provide an objective, data-driven analysis of your game. We'll evaluate you on more than 15 skills, giving you both an overall rating and a clear trajectory for your Division I potential. You'll know exactly where you stand and what you need to do to improve. Learn more at www.champs.app.
If folks do want to learn more about the actual Boston College and even more about Katie King Crowley, you should go back and listen to episode 26 from June of 2021, and she can give you the whole background on Chestnut Hill and the whole campus and all that kind of stuff. But I really want to focus on kind of today, the state of Boston College women's hockey. So, because in the early 2000s, and for many years, perennial top 10 team up until about 2019 or so, but since then, some good years, some so-so years, and more typically being in the top 15 to 20 the last few seasons. So let me kind of get right to one direct question, which we'll expand upon. What happened against Minnesota back in September? So for folks who don't know, you guys basically, it wasn't very competitive, the games. I believe the total score was, more than double digits to 1 or 2 goals for you guys. So kind of what happened so early on in the season, and what was the challenge with the team at that time?
Yeah, it's a direct question, but anyone can go online and look at the box score. So, it's not anything to hide from. I think it's a combination of things, and there's no excuse. Like, that's not how we want to play and not how we want to perform. Part of it is, give their kudos. They're a great team. They're very deep, and, a lot of their players were playing all summer at, world championship events, national team camps, different things. we had a young team that came in, a lot of them first college hockey games, and we were asking, a lot of our players, and, unfortunately, sometimes early on in the year that can happen. And I think sometimes if you look at the box scores, especially night two, 35 minutes into that game, we were right there, and they did get us in the end. And it was a learning moment. But I think if you look deeper, especially night two, we had a ton of opportunities that we didn't capitalize on. And I think, again, the score is the score, so you can't get away from that. But, at the same time, we've seen a lot of great growth this year from this group, and we're really excited about where the team's at. We just had a great weekend with UConn, and I think going into BU this weekend, we feel really good about our group and where it's trending.
Gotcha. So, but looking big picture, you guys, have had tremendous talent on Boston College, and obviously, almost all this is before your time. So, you can only have so much perspective on what's transpired. But you've lost a lot of talent in recent years, whether it's from graduation, the transfer portal, or other people. For example, Courtney Kennedy may have been the spot that opened up that you then filled. But she was a great recruiter. She was at every event. She's a U.S. national coach. So they've lost a lot of talent. And I'm just wondering, I know on the men's side, you're still a powerhouse. So I know it isn't resources or school support. What's changed?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think the landscape's definitely changed. And I think for us, we're always trying to look internally and make sure we're doing things the right way to, like you said, make sure that our players are getting better, to make sure this program is continuing to strive in the national landscape. And I think we're doing those right things, and, kudos to those people who before had done it. But, at the same time, we're here now, and we're looking forward to kind of building where we're at. And, I think outside of maybe a few programs in the country, everybody has lost some players. Everybody, the landscape is changing, and, we're gonna believe in the kids we have here, and we're gonna recruit kids that want to be here. And I think we have the right group of people around here, from staff, support staff, players, to get the job done when it matters.
Gotcha. And do you think things like the transfer portal or even NIL, or any revenue sharing can help you? I mean, because you guys are a big school. You're I forget the term, but you're a Power Five school, and you can't have money to help attract these top players. Are any of these things that you're going to leverage as assets to help get that talent pool up?
Yeah, I think everybody's looking at their assets currently, right? Like us, everybody's looking at what they have, what they provide, and trying to maximize it. So I think, we're trying to look at what we do internally, like I said before, and that's from a recruitment standpoint, from a development standpoint, on and off the ice, to try and make sure that, we are where we should be. And again, that takes time too. We're building it, and I think, like we said, we have the right group here to do that, and we do have the right resources to do that. And, I think it's exciting times ahead for BC. And, I think there's a lot of programs that I think would want to be in our position. So I think we're really excited about that.
Maybe also just spend a couple of minutes just talking about Ava Thomas and the impact that she's had already as a freshman, being the leading scorer, averaging greater than a point per game. I mean, that's a pretty impressive start to her college career.
Yeah, I think we've had, Ava's been great. And I think a lot of our freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors, everybody's kind of playing their role. Like I said before, when we talked about what I had learned, from, previous experience, even from, being a good teammate, like we have some unbelievable people that love BC. So yes, like Ava on the stat sheet is doing what she does, and we're very excited about that. But, there's also a ton of other players, Sammy Tabor, some of the other young ones. Like, I think there's a lot of players that are contributing in a lot of ways. And great that Ava's getting, a little bit more of the attention, but there's also a lot of people, I think, that are providing a ton of value for this program, and helping us push forward as well.
Ooh, I love that team first attitude that you got to give in your answer. So excellent, excellent. All right, maybe just talk about Hockey East. So I was just kind of looking at the rankings and looking at how I think about teams and things like that. And it seems that Hockey East is now clearly below the WCHA and the ECAC in terms of strength of conference, right? Currently, the only top 15 team from Hockey East, I believe, is Northeastern. They're off to a great start this year. But what's it like competing in a conference that's kind of used to be much stronger, and now overall it just seems like it's kind of now back to middle of the pack?
So that's a great question. I think, when you look at conferences, I think everybody is relative to their conference, right? I think right now, last year, we had a great success against ECAC, maybe early on this year, like, okay, our games against Cornell didn't go where we wanted to, but I think the league overall and the conference, is doing great things. I think we're all building, we're all fighting, to win recruiting battles. I think you see the talent that's in our league right now. It's growing immensely. Like UConn is in the top 10 as well. We're right outside there. I think, some teams maybe didn't have the starts they wanted, but I think as the year goes on, and we still have some, out of conference play to get through, I think you'll see Hockey East continue to rise because I think we have, great staffs working really hard across the league. I think we have really good talent coming in, not only this year, but the following years, if you look at the recruiting pools. So I think that's only going to go up, from the travel within the league where you get to be at home more. There's, great opportunities academically. I think the league's in a really good place. And, I think, past is reality. So to your point, history is history, but I think the future is looking really good for our league. And I know the staffs in our league are out on the road, putting in the work to continue to have Hockey East climb back to the top.
And thank you for correcting me on UConn. I forgot they were number 8 this past week, and you beat them this weekend. So, obviously now you have a top 10 win. So thanks for reminding me about UConn. Didn't have them as top of mind. All right, well, let's just talk about, building a successful program. What does success look like for you guys? I mean, being realistic, you're probably not going to be, in the Frozen Four, or in terms of that as a goal for the team. But what does success look like? Is it winning the Beanpot? Is it winning Hockey East? Is it just winning games that you wouldn't have won last year? Well, how do you guys set goals and what are the expectations?
Well, there's no reason to not strive to be at the end. So like, for us, like, people can look at our record and think what they want, and that's, completely fine, and understand that, the opening weekend a lot of people would probably say, well, they're not there. But, at the same time, you don't win or lose the national championship on your opening weekend. So you get a barometer of where you are, and, we strive to be in the Frozen Four. We strive to be, to win the first national championship here every day. And that's, Coach, Crowley's message. And that's what we believe in. And regardless of where our record is and what has happened, our goal is to win a national championship here. And we want people that want to come here and be part of that first one.
So can you actually give specifics of what the role of the coaching staff is in establishing that winning culture? Like, what exactly do you do to say, okay, our goal is to win a national championship this year with the players that we got, regardless of what anyone else thinks? So how do you actually do that day in and day out, kind of come to the rink and establish those standards on a daily basis?
Yeah, well, it starts at the top, obviously. Like, that's the leader of our program with Coach Crowley. She sets that standard from day one. And, it's little things, Ray. It's the little habits that the players have to learn away from the puck. It's details, it's, discipline, it's different things where it's micro growth throughout the season. We have to just continually step by step. And, you hope that you can turn that, you can turn that 5 goals into 3 by Christmas, and then you're even by January. And by the time you get to playoffs, you're flipping them into wins. Like, that's what you have to do. You have to grow. And you have to play the game the right way as a group, like, If you go up against certain teams, you're going to have to play a certain way to win. And the great thing about the NCAA tournament is it's one game. So, regardless of if a team's better than you or not, if you have a better day and you're prepared, you can win. So, as much as it's easy to look at it and say, well, it's going to be this team or that team, like it could be anybody that gets in the tournament. You get a hot goalie. Like we believe we have one of the best goalie groups, around, and, it prepares us. And, if we get into a 1-game scenario, we believe we'll be, a really dangerous team.
Got it. So I did see an interview with Coach Crowley talking about the leadership of this specific team, and I'm curious, is what's the role of that leadership group in ensuring the highest standards for all the players? What is your expectation of what they're going to do? Because as Aaron Hamlin told me, like the second the coach leaves the locker room, it's the players that really run the team. Whether the coaches only have a say and influence, but at the end of the day, it's the players that play the games and run the room. What's your thoughts?
And she's right. And, it is the player-led teams are the ones that take you the farthest. That's the reality. I think, we always talk about, and I think Kinger does a great job of, setting a standard. And, I think our captains this year, Jade Arnone and Grace Campbell, and among others too. It's not just our captains. I think we have a ton of leaders in that room that lead in different ways, even though they don't have a letter. But we have meetings constantly with them about our expectations, and making sure that chain of command is making sure that message is getting passed down properly. And we always talk about the conversation after the conversation, right? So we have the conversation, like you said, we step out of the room, and then we know that message is being pushed down. We know that they're holding the standard in the right way, and they do a great job too of communicating and making sure that if there are things that we need to address, that we do. And I think that's what great leaders do. They're not afraid to say what they need to say, and they all they both lead by example. And not just them, but there's a group of, I think, of people in our locker room that don't have letters that also do an amazing job of stepping up. And that's, I think, the true testament of leadership is those who don't have letters who step up and make sure they support the captains as well.
Got it. Okay. Last question, just about making sure that you got a successful program. I believe you only have 24 or 25 players, so you don't have that many players not playing every game that are healthy scratches, so to speak. But how do you keep everybody motivated? Like everybody wants more ice time. Everybody wants to be on the power play or the penalty kill or special teams, whatever. I'm sure all 3 of your goalies want to play every game and things like that. So how do you manage that both at the coaching level and at the leadership level to make sure everybody's happy and managing people's expectations properly?
Another great question. And the big thing, again, and I know I keep repeating myself, but like it starts with Coach Crowley does a great job of setting expectations, I think, early on of if you want more, then go find a way to earn more. Like that's really what it's about. Like if you're not getting the ice time you want, like we'll do skills with you, we'll do video, we'll do whatever we can to help you. But at the end of the day, we have to put the group out there in those certain roles that are going to execute, right? And so you have to build up that that trust, and you have to execute when asked, right? And so that's really what it comes down to is, it's an unfortunate reality for Division I athletics. We're not the only program that goes through it. And there's probably others that probably go through it more just because of roster size, so it's one of those things where, especially there are players that come in, it might be the first time they're ever in that situation. So it's really also about supporting them as well. Like it's not that you're not playing and you're not valued. Like you are valued. Everybody here has a role. Like if you're not playing, like is it helping out in other ways? Is it supporting your teammates? If you're not getting the minutes you want, like how are you on the bench? Like if you are getting the minutes, that's a lot of pressure too to execute, right? So I think it's really about supporting the players, and each individual player, because they're all, every situation is unique. So, but it does really start at the top, and Coach Crowley does a great job of setting expectations and kind of making it clear that if you're put in those positions, to make sure you're executing, but also to know that we're here to help. We want to help kids get better, And I think that's what our goal is really, is to have everybody, have the best experience they can. But we also have to make sure that, like you said, we're trying to win a national championship at the end of the day. That's what we're here to do. Right. So.
Makes a lot of sense. All right, so now let's move over to the recruiting side of things and your next wave of players that you're going to be continually improving with. Based on my math, is you have 7 players committed, at least that I've been able to track for 2026, and then 5 players already for 2027. And based on my math, that's all the players that you need for those 2 recruiting classes. Maybe you need a D here or a goalie there, but I'm sure those could be flexible based on kind of how things evolve at the end of the season. Here's my question for you. When I looked at this year has been highly accelerated in terms of the recruiting pace and the people that committed very early on in the process. You guys are the poster child of that. You had 2 players commit in June, basically, obviously within 2 weeks of the June 15th deadline, and then 3 in August, and then it looked like that's all you need. So maybe just talk about the accelerated recruiting process, and then I'll ask you some questions about where you guys are at today.
No, that's a fair question. And I think, you're seeing a trend, especially this summer across the entire recruiting landscape, not just us, but I think there's been a ton of quicker decisions. And I think that a lot of that comes down to the rule change was a few years ago. I believe it was 3 years ago now. It was my first year on the women's side, was the first year of the after June 15th sophomore recruiting class. So I think now what's happened is the parents and the players are all very savvy on how this process goes. And I think a lot of them understand that if you do get opportunities with schools that are at the top of your list or somewhere that you really feel valued, they're quicker to be jumping on those opportunities. So, every player that we had commit, it was kind of honestly somewhat of a surprise because they're making decisions quicker than anticipated. And I think that was a trend in talking with a lot of other coaches across the board of people, or, when you see people at rinks, other coaches, it's, hey, is that happening for you too? Oh, yes, absolutely. So I think it's a common across the board right now of, and I think I would attribute it to, just the parents and the players understanding the landscape more and not wanting to miss out on opportunities that they're excited about.
Yeah, that's one of the hypotheses that we've heard, kind of confirmed anecdotally, is that players and parents are much more educated than they were a couple of years ago. And therefore, with teams not only being aggressive, you also have on the other side of things, parents and players much more prepared to actually make a decision and make it quicker. All right, so I'm just curious. Where are you at in your recruiting process? Am I correct to say that you're full for 26 and you're full for 27, and that you're now more focusing on 28s, 29s at this point? Where we're in mid-November. Where are you at? Where in of how you're spending your time recruiting?
Yeah, I think recruiting, it's funny with recruiting. It's always an ever-flowing situation, right? You're one thing away from having availability to not. So, we always look at it as, free flowing. So as of right now, we are focusing more on the future for sure. I think most programs would be, into the 28 class and kind of beyond. But, as and as the world is right now, is when March comes and, you see where things fall, if there's opportunities to make your program better, then, I don't think every program is always, ready and open just in case to do so.
Got it. All right. So now let's go into your actual recruiting process. What is it that you look for as a coach at Boston College when you're evaluating players?
That's a great question. And I think the number one thing is you got to be able to compete and skate at the level. I think that's, for me at least, when I'm looking at a player, do you have competitiveness? Can you skate at the level? If you can be at pace, if you can have a competitiveness, have an edge, at a minimum, you're going to make sure that that's the baseline, I think. And I think after that, it can get into also what we need, like for us specifically. I guess I could phrase this in 2 ways. There's 2 ways to look at this. if I'm talking about recruiting here specifically, then, it could be based on what we need. Do we need a shutdown defenseman? Do we need a top line center? Do we need a PK person, a power play? So it can be very intricate on the individual side. I think generally, for me specifically, it would be about skating, competitiveness, and then the big thing too, hockey IQ. Like those are the three things you got to have. I feel like if you have those three things, the rest of it we can always teach. I think that's when you look at it, right? Like you're not many teams are going to get not many kids coming in are ready-made products, by any means. They got to learn and grow. But if you can skate, if you're competitive and you have a good IQ, I think there's a lot of things that you can do with a player like that. So those would be the three baseline generally for me if I'm looking at a player, I'm at a tournament.
Very, very similar to Dan Cook at Wisconsin. He said, "Hey, we're not looking for the perfect player, but we're looking for the player that has all the key elements that we can then, fill in the gaps when they get here." So that makes a lot of sense. All right, last question. What advice do you have for parents and players who are going to go through the recruiting process for 2028s and 29s in the future? What advice do you have as they kind of navigate all the challenges? And obviously, they can't talk to you right now, but how do they prepare for what's coming up in the future?
I think the number one thing would be try to go somewhere where if hockey got taken away, you would still love your experience. Because, knock on wood for every player out there, and I hope no one goes through an injury in their life, but if hockey got taken away, would you still love the place you're at? And the other thing too is like, if you love the game and you want to keep playing, there are so many amazing places to continue to play hockey. I think it's always awesome to strive for the highest level, but there's only so many spots and there's only so many opportunities. And to our point we just talked about, Ray, of like maybe you're just the type of player that a bunch of people have. And so it's not that you're not good enough, it just might not be the right fit. So maybe going to, a great Division III program or an ACHA program or, U Sports in Canada, like don't close any doors on yourself. If you want to keep playing, there's so many great avenues to do so. Strive for the best, try to get where you want to go. And if that's your dream, pursue it. But I also think like be really excited if you get an opportunity to play 4 more years of hockey, at a university and get a degree. I really think that can't be lost on people.
Yeah, absolutely. The one question people always ask me is like, what happens if I don't play? Do you want to go? You can always find a team to play on. That's not going to be the issue. Question is it the right fit for you? And there, especially if you're halfway decent as a hockey player, there is always opportunity. There's always Division III schools looking for players at a minimum, not a maximum. So you can always find a place to play. Excellent. All right. Well, Max, I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate you sharing your background and how you got into coaching and all the connections that led to where you are today. And definitely really appreciate you answering all my tough questions on Boston College women's hockey and what you guys are doing to kind of get back up the hill again and hopefully make it to a national championship game or even the Frozen Four. So thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Ray. Really appreciate your time and all the best.
On today's episode, I talked with Max Gavin, assistant coach with the Boston College women's hockey team. We discussed what it's like growing up in a hockey family, the current state of BC women's hockey, how they are striving to return to being a top-ranked team, and maintaining a winning culture. Max also shares his insights about the current dynamics of this year's recruiting cycle. This was an awesome conversation with Max, so please enjoy.